Jay texted us this morning and says he didn't realize the podcast that we planned last week at 1:00 was actually happening at 1:00. So our bad, Jay, for sticking to the podcast time that we agreed to. And so let's get right into an economic update, because I just saw the 10-year Treasury is up to like 4.45. I don't know what happened, why it spiked so much, but Jay, you want to tell us what's going on? What happened? Why is the 10-year Treasury up so high?
Are we really talking about an economic update today?
Are we really doing an economic update?
No, obviously we're talking election. The whole reason that we pushed this podcast off, we're talking elections.
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate. Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey there, welcome to episode 72 of Drunk Real Estate. I am Kyle Wilson, Ashley Wilson's husband, and I'm here with my three best friends again, starting with Jay Scott, who's the happiest of the bunch here. How's it going, Jay?
This is weird. We're recording this in like the afternoon time for me, so I'm not drinking today. So
yeah, so we're recording this on Wednesday at 1 p.m. We normally record Tuesday night, but there was some stuff going on Tuesday, so it was a little busy. So we decided to push it back, wait for some more news kind of going on. So right now, this is kind of day. So I don't know if anyone else is drinking. You drinking, Jay?
I'm not drinking, just water. Just finished my coffee. So
just water today.
Yeah, I have to go pick up my kids in a bit.
Well, I might as well go to AJ if we're not all drinking.
I got the Alani energy drink here. It's supposed to be a little more healthy. I'm hitting it.
Never even heard of that. That sounds healthy.
Dude, they're so good. The peach, the Alani, they're supposed to be this more healthy type energy drink, but the peach tastes amazing.
Caffeinated, carbonated? No?
Oh, yeah. Caffeinated, carbonated, all of it.
I'll make a note of that. Mauricio, what do you got for us?
Dude, I'm disappointed in myself because I was this close to just finishing off a bottle of wine that I opened up yesterday, a little Farniente, and I was like, I know nobody else is going to drink. I'll drink. And I just, last minute, I decided not to, so I'm just drinking my coffee.
Well, yeah, I'm going to disappoint everyone too. I'm doing Monster. I was up pretty late last night. I stuck it out. I know most people probably just gave up and went to bed, but I stuck it out. So should we just get right into this? It was, so Jay texted us this morning and says he has a hard stop after 1 hour. He didn't realize the podcast that we planned last week at 1:00 was actually happening at 1:00. So our bad, Jay, for sticking to the podcast time that we agreed to. But that means we got to get right into this. Kind of I don't know. Some people weren't surprised. I was a bit surprised by how red it was. It was all red all day. I started red, never came back red. It looks like now, as we're talking right now, it just looks like the House is even going red. So Senate, House, President, all red. So I'll start with AJ. I'll let you take the victory lap because you did call all of this and get your thoughts on it.
So I think it's really interesting. In fact, I was telling you guys earlier, I created some data sets where I pull out a whole bunch of information from the government. And what we did is we looked at the media, we looked at lawsuits, we looked at criticism of the Democratic Party, and we tracked them over time. And it was fascinating for a few reasons. First of all, the correlation between them is insane. It's like almost exact. And the big thing that we looked at, though, was how far off the media is and has been. And it's really to a point where if you're listening to mainstream media or anything else like that, even the poll numbers, you really are just so disconnected with the reality of the situation. And what I think happens is these echo chambers get worse. And essentially, the Democratic Party, they lost the plot. Like, they lost the plot completely. And it's a time that people are done, they're fed up. And I think they not only were not being listened to, but to me, the shocking thing just was the amount of almost denial that they were in such a bad spot. And it was pretty mainstream where if you actually looked and saw what was going on, it was pretty clear that the support was overwhelmingly for Trump. And you see these medias and they're like, we can't believe it. And we're shocked. And it's like, you sit here and go, I don't know how this is still surprising to you. because it's very clear. But I think when you look at what was going on, is Trump derangement syndrome was such a real thing that it kind of blinds, like you can't even see it. Because essentially they lost the plot, meaning what voters really care about. So if you look at the entire stance of what they were going on, really there's two things. I'm not Trump and abortion. That was, for the presidency, that was the platform. Nobody else really knew what she was doing. She never gave real interviews, long form. It was all betted on abortion and I'm not Trump. And I think they actually believe, because they have Trump derangement syndrome so bad, that everybody feels that way. And this idea that they come in and say, here's our defense. If you're a racist, he's Hitler, democracy's on the line. She did a press conference at the White House to call him Hitler. And they think that that helps. And so all of a sudden people go, you have nothing to stand on. But they believe those things. They actually believe them. And America's like, we don't. And it loses the plot. They just get so far out on anything that mattered. She was so unlikable.
Why do you think that worked for one side but not the other? Because if you think about it, I mean, there was Hitler on one side and there was communist enemy within on the other side. It worked on one side, though.
So it didn't. So what we did with the data and we plotted out, if you look at the media, and there's great stats behind it. So overwhelmingly, over 85% of all media outlets' coverage of Trump was negative. Over 90%. Where over with Kamala, over 85% of all media coverage was positive. So that's actually not true at all. And when you look at the comments from Trump versus her, she referenced Trump and democracy and everything at a rate that was over 10 times what Trump did.
Which media outlets were you looking at? Because I have to assume, and I don't watch any media, any TV, sorry. I have to assume that the folks that were following Trump and Trump supporters were watching right-wing media, and I can't imagine right-wing media was talking nicely about Kamala. So I have to assume they were.
No, this is all media outlets together. So it's Fox, it's MSNBC, all legacy media outlets. What they do is they take all media outlets and they bunch them together and they look at over 2009 till today. And you can actually see, even with Biden, there was a 1-year period with Biden where the media had more negative than they did positive. 1 year. Other than that, the separation was astronomical. And during that 1 year, it was mainly driven by Fox. So that the outlet, right, that the rest of all the media, though, combined, it was driven. So the disparity between the two narratives is astronomical, where you have an overwhelming majority. Then when it comes to their messaging, Trump in his rallies and his speeches, everything else, you can actually take and you can go plot it out and look how many times he referenced her, how many times that he talked about her and that she was bad, everything else, and then compare it to how many times she referenced him. She referenced him more in one speech than he did in the entire time.
Well, I also think he did a good job of tying her to Biden, and she didn't do a good enough job of distancing herself. She was in a tough spot, right? Where like she's the current vice president to Joe Biden, and so when they ask her questions like, "Hey, would you change anything that Biden has done?" Like she's kind of in a tough spot where she's either got to say, "Hey, like I think my current like president, the person that I'm serving under right now, didn't do a good job on certain things," or I got to just say, "Hey, he did a great job. I wouldn't change anything." And that's the route she took. And I think that completely backfired because I think everyone just looked at her as Obama 2.0 or not Obama, looked at her as Biden 2.0, and that's the way they voted.
Yeah, and the other rhetoric, which since we're talking about rhetorics, again, I don't follow this stuff that closely, but the one rhetoric I was following, which again didn't make a ton of sense and apparently didn't resonate, was they kept referring to Trump like, hey, if Trump gets into office, look at all the terrible things that are going to happen. Democracy's gone. We're going to have all these wars. We're going to do all this stuff, all these negative things. He's already been in office. So it's like we already know he was in there for 4 years and those things didn't happen. So why would that happen now versus it didn't happen when it first went through? And so those arguments, I think, kind of fell flat on their heads too, because he's been around before. So one of the things, and I'm not a big Trump fan myself, but one of the things that you have to give him credit for, maybe it was coincidence or not, but this was typically a Democratic issue, but like during his 4 years, there wasn't a single war out there. Like he went 4 years without a war. And now you could say that was luck or that was coincidence or whatever, but at the end of the day, there was no war.
Except literally the one war the U.S. was in that we're no longer in.
Yeah, the Iraq War.
Afghanistan,
sorry.
That predated when he was in there.
20 years. So, and he was getting us actively out of it.
Yeah. And then Biden finally got us out of there in a pretty disastrous fashion, as we all know.
Yeah.
I guess it's just disingenuous to say that we weren't in a war during Trump when
we didn't start. There was no new war that started. But there are no new wars that the U.S. has been involved in since Biden. So the Ukraine thing doesn't.
I don't believe how many U.S. soldiers have died in Ukraine.
We're funding the entire Ukraine war.
That has nothing to do with it. We were funding Ukraine back in 2018.
Yeah, but we basically run NATO. We basically run NATO, and this is a whole NATO operation moving east. So
we fund every war around the world, no matter who's in it.
This is a NATO issue. This is a NATO moving themselves east, and that's a U.S. driven thing.
You can't argue that because of U.S. dollars or American dollars are part of the war that we're part of it. Because again,
okay. So an easier way to, I guess, look at it would be we have the worst geopolitical stance in more continents than we have had since World War II. That is unequivocally true. The entire Middle East, Europe right now we have tensions that are the highest they've ever been in Asia. So we have every continent basically outside one in the world that is involved in some major way, shape, or form with world powers right now. And that has not happened since World War II. That all happened under Biden. So yes, we were in the Iraq war that had been going on for 20 years. He was getting us out. The world geopolitically, to say that it didn't descend into chaos is, how can we even say that? Europe's at war. We haven't seen this stuff since literally World War II.
I mean, that's fine, but I mean, we can talk about how much of that is Biden's fault versus anybody else. I could say during Trump, we had the first major pandemic in 100 years under Trump. That doesn't mean it was Trump's fault.
I'm not saying it is, but what we are saying is when people went to the voting poll, once again, we lost the plot.
Yeah, but do you really think there's any people where like the major issue to them was geopolitical? I feel like there's so many other major issues that someone like me, yes, I factor that in when I'm voting, and it kind of comes out in a big blob that that shifts one way or another.
Israel probably.
Yeah, I think Israel absolutely. And Kamala was running 2 different ads. Did you see CNN's thing? She ran 2 different ads in 2 different states. So in Michigan, she ran an ad that was pro-Palestine. And then in Pennsylvania, she ran an ad that was pro-Israel, and CNN caught her. And they put the 2 ads side by side. And what they did was they cut the ads to make it look, and she went out, I'm in favor and pro-Israel. Then in the other state ran an ad saying, I'm pro.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, I don't think we need to dive into ads and how they're misleading and like every single, like I'm in Pennsylvania.
No, they're all misleading. But what I'm saying is it was a big enough issue that I think you're right. Palestine, Israel, I think was. That's what I'm saying, is that I think it was a big enough issue to where they were actively. And 2, I'm not saying Trump didn't do those things as well. I know he said whatever and whatever campaign because they're politicians, right? But I think it was a big issue. That's what I mean by it. I think it was a big enough one to where each party had to really think about that.
What about immigration? Do you think that was one of the big issues as well? I mean, I think that was a huge one, right? Because that was starting to affect people's day-to-day lives. I mean, I think whether you agree with the strategy or not, I always thought it was brilliant. Whether it was an appropriate strategy, a bad strategy, an ethical one or a non-ethical one, the fact that the border states started busing and making it a problem for the non-border states, I think that started to affect people, and it became an issue for the entire country versus just the border states. I thought that was a very fascinating strategy.
Yeah, I mean, my take is Democrats ran a horrendously bad campaign. There's no way around. There's no way around it. They didn't run on policy. What policy they did run on was crappy policy, and so they I don't think Trump won this election. I think the Democrats lost it. I'm not saying Trump ran a bad campaign and did what he needed to do. I wasn't a fan of his campaign, but I certainly wasn't a fan of Harris's campaign either. But I think if you look at the raw data, at the end of the day, what we're going to see is that Trump is likely going to get the same number of votes in 2024 as he got in 2020. Doesn't mean it's all the same voters, but he's going to have the same level of support. At the same time, I think we're going to see that the Dems, Harris is going to get about 12 million fewer votes than Biden did. Basically, the Democrats couldn't get turnout. And the reason I'm assuming that is because there's basically two ways to run a campaign. Not saying they're both good or equal, but you can run on fear or you can run on policy. And Democrats tried to run on fear and it didn't work. And so they didn't have enough policy, and basically they couldn't get people to turn out.
In Pennsylvania, which I think we had it worse. We had the worst of any state as far as political ads. And I think the number one ad that I would see was Project 2025, and which Trump had already come out and said he has no affiliation with it. It was basically fringe people around who had affiliation with him. But yet that was their number one thing, is that they were saying, hey, Project 2025, if Trump gets in office, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Jay and Kyle. The one had a point. So one, you were voting for something. The other one, you were voting against something. That never works. So Trump, there was a reason for it, where you're exactly right. The Democrats, it was fear-based and vote for us because Orange Man bad. I mean, that's literally what it was. And the only way that wins...
I heard the exact same thing from the other side. I mean, everything
it is, but they actually had policy. They had a reason. They were talking about it.
Do they have policy, though?
Well, I mean, even you just said that one ran on policy, the other one ran on fear.
No. I said Democrats ran on fear.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
But that doesn't mean I think Republicans ran on fear also. They
always do.
Right.
But it was way more. They ran way more on policy.
Republicans have more practice at it. They were much better at it. Democrats didn't know how to run on fear.
So first of all, they had solutions.
I don't believe that Trump ran on policy. He ran on high level sentences, but that's not policy. I mean, find me a clip of Trump talking about tariffs in a way that he seems to actually understand what tariffs are.
I can show you some. He had one of the best descriptions that actually changed my thought process on tariffs. Did you listen to, so he has 3 podcasts that are over 2 hours. His podcast where he goes in depth, I was like, this is incredible. He talked for hours on these issues and he went in depth. And I don't think Trump's an in-depth guy, which too, remember everybody, I'm not a pro-Trumper. I didn't want him. I didn't vote him last time. I didn't want him. I didn't want him this time. But to say that he wasn't running on more policy than Harris is ludicrous. He went in depth on what
unfortunately with Harris, if she doesn't give us concrete policy, then what are we going to assume she's going to do? We're going to assume that she's going to do what Biden did. We're going to look back, and to me, a lot of this election came down to the devil you know, where she was making it pretty clear that if we elect her, then it's going to be kind of the same as Biden. And the thing about Trump is that I got with him is I don't now I have this feeling of anxiety that because I don't know what it's going to happen with Trump. People can say oh, we already had 4 years of him, but yeah, we had 4 years of him. But if you go back and you look at all of the things that he promised and said he was going to do, and all of the things he talked about in the lead up to the last election, he's maybe generously 50-50. And I would say the majority of the things that he said he was going to do, he ended up compromising on. He ended up not going the full way on it. And so I don't know. I now have this anxiety over which of these things that he said he's going to do, is he going to go all the way? Is he not going to address it all? Is he going to kind of compromise? Something like the tariffs. If he goes all the way, that's bad. And that's why, to me, the 10-year Treasury jumped so much, is everyone's scared about he's going to put tariffs on everyone. But if he compromises this, and AJ has brought this up multiple times, where it's kind of more just, hey, reciprocal, people who tariff us, we're going to reciprocate. And it's kind of a a pick and choose option. I don't think a pick and choose tariff thing is that bad. So like, to me, I just have this pent up, like, what's going to happen now? Or for all we know, he's not even going to have time because he's just going to spend all this time trying to get all of his legal issues taken care of, and he's not really going to care about it. So like, I just have this anxiety of what's going to happen versus if we had Kamala, I kind of knew what was going to happen, and I just didn't agree with her policies.
The part that's interesting with Trump is that, and it's happened before, and AJ can probably tell me in the 19th century, whenever the other president that came in a non-consecutive term, but most presidents come in and their number one priority is to get reelected, and so a lot of the stuff they do in their first term is to basically get reelected, and then it's usually
has there ever been one?
Yeah, there is one. Yeah, it's like in 18 something. I don't know, 1830s. I forget who it was. But usually the second term is when people focus more on their legacy and international stuff and diplomacy. So I'm wondering, he's going to come in there and he's not going to run again. Plus he's pretty old anyway. So it'll be interesting to see what his priorities are, that he has not a care in the world. He's got 2 years now that looks like he's going to have both Congress, both the House and the Senate. So he's going to be able to ram a lot of stuff through.
And two, he got a mandate. I mean, they swept Republicans. This was a bloodbath. And so one of the things that keeps getting mentioned too is America literally told politicians what they want. And it was, they've been very clear. We're going to gut the Fed. We are going after this. They talked about how they think they can eliminate $3 trillion in excess spending. They're going to go after other countries. They're going to try to clean up tariffs. Whether you agree with this stuff or not, they went very clear. He set up a whole team to go out and talk, and that he was part of. And a lot of people loved that. He was surrounded by Democrats. You had people that he was bringing in that people thought was intelligent. They're coming in saying, I think we should do this. He's the first president to ever do that. They did it on his own dime. And they had a lot more substance there than, whether you like it or not, doesn't matter. There was more substance than when you talk about the Democrats campaign. What were they going to do? It's like, I guess they're going to do the same thing, but she's saying she's not. So then everybody would say, well, what are you going to do? And she didn't have answers.
So let's talk about that substance then, because I think this is important. And let me start with, I'm disappointed at the outcome. And I said this last week, that my preferred outcome was a split government. I wanted either Dems in Congress and Trump in office or Harris in office and Republicans in Congress, because personally, I'm scared of both agendas, both parties' agendas. So let's talk about substance. So the three big things that I heard from Trump over and over and over again are: one, deport 10 million people; two, tariffs across the board with 60% on China; and three, balance the budget. So let's talk. Does anybody here think he's going to accomplish all three of those?
No.
Does anybody here think he's going to accomplish two of those?
Well, see, that's where I'm getting into. It's like, what do you mean by accomplish? Because there's a lot of things that he promised last time.
But yeah, but it's in the direction that people want, though. Like, people want illegals. They want, whether you agree with it or not, they want the illegal immigration that came in over the last however many years. They want them to be gone. Now, whether he makes some progress or very little progress, at least we're going in the right direction. Like, that's.
But I don't believe that's possible. So let's talk about this from, again. It bothers me that we don't talk about policy in this country anymore. I'm old enough to remember when guys used to stand up on that podium and answer hard questions about not just what are you going to do, but how are you going to do it. So explain to me how you're going to implement massive tariffs, but you're also going to balance the budget and have a great economy without inflation. Tell me how you're going to deport.
So JD Vance had a great interview where he actually walked through. So when they looked at it, yeah. So one of the two big things that JD Vance and Trump were talking about was inflation, and how inflation is being driven by a few things, right? And they don't deny even that tariffs is inflationary. But when you look at it, so the last three votes that came in to over $3 trillion in spending, government spending, party line, Kamala Harris signed it off, and she was the tiebreaker on all three. And so you have inflationary thing through government spending, right? You have tariffs, you have obviously money printing, everything else. The idea is we balance out tariffs, we try to make them more fair, right? Go after that, which is inflationary. I don't think anybody's not, they didn't. And they said, but if you offset a lot of this stuff, how can you get money out of the system? You can either take it through the private sector, or they're like, we're spending $500 billion every 2 months with government mass spending. So their idea is to balance things out so it's not so skewed. So they're going to go after the federal government. They're going to try to lower bureaucracy. They're going to try to get rid of all these old, outdated regulations. And two, they're frankly going to try to gut it. They're going to try to get rid of spending and excess waste. That is not inflationary. That will actually shut down money going into the system. You are going to slow an engine because the engine is running off the American government. 50% of the new hires. I mean, it's crazy. So that their idea is that we're going to go in. They have a whole bunch of different departments, and they went through. I mean, you can listen to. They're very detailed about it, and they walked through. Here's where we think we can cut. Here's exactly. They had $3 trillion they outlined in like 5 different places that they could cut it from, and then they want the tariffs to get back into a more neutral, balancing act. And absolutely, they can go too far with it. Of course, right? Then illegal immigration. They do want to do all those things. I don't know if they can do that, but they walked through on how to actually do it. What was the number? 18 billion, which they actually showed. All right, how much money are we spending in Ukraine? How much money did they spend in 2 weeks? And so this idea that we cannot do it is not true, but how you want to do it in the application of it is you can. So I mean, from what I've seen and stuff, they actually have gone very in depth, hours-long conversations about this stuff.
So let me ask you a question. Great. So we throw on some tariffs. We cut the budget by $3 trillion. Well, the first thing that's going to happen when you put on big tariffs across the board is there are going to be retaliatory tariffs. So that's going to hurt our exporters. Next thing, you're going to cut $3 trillion out of the budget. So what's that going to do to GDP? What's that going to do to unemployment? What's that going to do to wage growth when you have $3 trillion that the government's not spending on jobs, on infrastructure? I mean, so basically you're going to have exporters who are struggling because they have retaliatory tariffs. You're going to have.
So why did Biden keep the tariffs, in fact, increase them? He kept the tariffs and he started to increase them.
Because he doesn't understand the economy any more than Trump does.
But here's the thing. I think the issue is we can't take everything Trump says literally.
But it's the direction they're going.
Right. And so when he says blanket tariffs, in my opinion, I don't think we could take that literally. Just like if you go through all this what I've been doing is been going back and I've been looking, okay, when Trump went through his last political campaign and he won, what did he actually follow through with and what did he end up doing? So he made claims, and here's a great example where he claimed that he was going to lower the business tax rate from 35% down to 15%. Did he do that? Well, no, kind of. He took it down from 35 down to 21. And so the point is that like he makes these claims that he's going to do these things, and then I guess you have to assume that he has other people who are crunching the numbers and working for him. And Trump's pretty good at surrounding himself with people who know what they are doing. He doesn't like necessarily like appoint the right people. He appoints friends sometimes, but it seems like the people around him make him look pretty good sometimes. And you got to assume that there's someone who's like, hey, listen, Mr. Trump, like we can't go all the way to 15%. We can't make those numbers work. What we can do is we can go to 21%. This is how we're going to do that. And then they compromise on it. So I guess that's the biggest, this whole, the corporate tax rate to me is the closest I can find to this tariff idea where he's just kind of saying like, oh, it's going to be blanket tariffs. And he's going to have to find some sort of compromise where it makes sense and they crunch the numbers. And this is going to be work out in our favor.
It's not analogous though, because tariffs are something that he can unilaterally implement, whereas changing the tax code, he cannot. That has to go through Congress.
Well, they have Congress now. But the point being is when you look at the two people, all right, so you look at Kamala versus Trump. We can talk in depth, and they've gone hour-long, both J.D. Vance, public appearance, and Trump's, is how many interviews they did compared to Kamala and her administration or anything else. It's wild. And when you even go onto her page and look on her page on what she's going to do. And so what are her issues? Housing, $25,000.
No, she's out. We're not talking about her anymore. We're talking about Trump. Let's talk about Trump.
About the election. What are you talking about? We're literally talking about the election.
But we all agree that her policies were gonna fail. I don't think that anybody's arguing that. So why are we? I'd rather talk about looking forward, what we can expect, not if there was an imaginary world where she won, what would happen.
I thought we were talking about the results, why people voted the way they did. They're still counting votes.
I mean, I definitely want to talk about what we expect because that's kind of what I was focused. Again, I'm not as political as you guys, but I mean, I was looking at the list of things just from the real estate perspective and even my perspective. I mean, I think one of the things you're going to start to see, which I think now is almost a guarantee is going to come back, is like bonus depreciation, for example, for real estate investors. I think that's almost now a guarantee. It already passed the House. It got stuck in the Senate. Now the Senate's, at least 52.
All of Trump's tax reform that was up to be like sunsetted, like I think it's almost guaranteed that they're just going to extend them.
Those are all going to come back. On the syndication side, on my world, which I pay attention to, obviously, we're going to have a new SEC commissioner. Obviously, Gelsler's going to go out. You can talk about all the crypto stuff from my perspective, all the stuff that got stuck in the Senate, like the accredited investor definition updates. Those are most likely going to go through, and even some of these capital raising, allowances that got tabled. So everything that got tabled 3 years ago or 3.5 years ago, I think now we're back on the table, which is going to really help.
Do you think Lena Khan is gone because of this?
Probably.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff I was more excited about. That's why I know you guys were a little bit like, and I get it, like you guys are fearful of the whole, but the fact that he now has, it looks like he definitely has the Senate. It looks like from you guys are telling me the House is almost there as well. Then I just think these things that really affect real estate investors, again, real estate investors.
Well, here's a question I have for you guys then is, so obviously the 10-year Treasury believes that we got massive inflation coming. Like the 10-year Treasury spiked. Like it went up by almost 5%.
1,400 points, the highest jump after an election ever. S&P's up 500, soaring.
So everyone just believes that Trump equals inflation and it equals, therefore, higher interest rates.
Growth. So interest rates is definitely equal because it depends on what kind of inflation you're talking about, right? So there's inflationary, when you look at asset inflation, particularly when you're looking at stocks, when you're looking at real estate, right? There is productivity, inflation that drives up prices, obviously in a good way, inflation that is totally corrosive.
I think what everyone's believing, though, yes, I agree, but I think what everyone's believing is basically bad, the bad inflation that we had. Like, because if you had to have that kind of reaction then why was
but the Dow was up? Because if that was true, that means interest rates are going to go up.
Inflation isn't necessarily bad for stocks and companies, like in profit margins.
It is if interest rates go up. And so that's why every time that they went, like job reports came out, everything else, the stock market would go down, because if interest rates come up, the yields that you can get from more fixed, safe ones are high. I mean, if you're getting 6% on a fixed asset that's backed by government stuff, why put it in the stock market?
So I think everybody believes, and probably rightfully so, that Trump is going to be good, at least short term, for the economy. He said he wants to take control of Fed decisions or be involved in Fed decisions on interest rates, and he wants lower interest rates. So there's a good chance we're going to see lower interest rates. What's lower interest rates going to do? It's going to drive spending and inflation, and companies are going to do well, and stocks are going to do well, and that makes everybody excited. But as Kyle said, what happens when you lower interest rates and there's lots of spending? You see inflation, and so bonds are going up, and so the dollar is getting stronger because you're likely going to see liquidity move towards us as rates move down.
Like gold was down too. Gold's down pretty substantially.
They can't do that though, unless so it could blow up in his face. Absolutely, because there's no way. He has to cut. You cannot just go, oh, we're going to have growth and lower interest rates, because you can get hyperinflation. This was Biden's mistake. And if they don't learn from the freaking past, it'll blow up in his face and everything will be a house of cards, because Main Street will destroy itself if you have 10, 12, 13% inflation rate, which if you're not cutting, and I'm all about a growing economy, I'm all about that stuff. But if you have inflation like we did under Biden again, it doesn't matter. The country will implode. Businesses will start to fail. So he's got to balance that.
Yeah, but to Jay's point though earlier, like and I wrote down economic growth. You talked about GDP, Jay. But yeah, to Jay's point though, if you start cutting and you're going to be cutting these government workers, that does mean unemployment's going to go up, right? So there's less people going around. And I guess what the way I would think of this is, again, GDP is interesting But if it's artificial GDP, like for example, I'll give you it's a very simple example. If you print $1 trillion worth of currencies and then go hire a bunch of government workers, your GDP is going to go up. But is that really true, real economic growth? Is that the kind of growth we want? And then the problem, though, is it's artificial. But then if you come in and cut it down, there's pain. There's going to be real pain. There's going to be real people that get laid off. There's real people that potentially, my issue was potentially those real people that now have those mortgages that they don't want to leave their mortgages. Now they get laid off and now they got to sell their house. I mean, it can turn into, you're unwinding something you didn't like, but it still means there's pain. It's not just like, oh, we're just going to cut.
Well, they said that. You had J.D. Vance and Elon Musk said there will be pain in the short term.
So Elon Musk went a step further. Elon Musk said we are going to see an economic crash. So do we believe that is likely what's going to happen, or is that another one of those? Hey,
but Trump doesn't care. He's not looking to get reelected. Trump's not looking to get reelected. So that's one.
He's shifting it from government to the right now. The government makes up like all of the GDP growth over the last 4 years. It's all the spending, everything else. And so I agree. I think there will be a contraction. I think there has to be. Or if there's not, that just means we're living on the government. And in order to make that switch, I think there's going to be short-term pains. I think so if you do it right. Now, whether they can accomplish that, everything else, but the spending and that shift that has to take place, I mean, this is a huge number. Like you're all right. Like Mauricio's, this is a huge number. So if you start taking trillions of dollars out, which I think we should, but I think there's going to be pain. The idea that we can get out of things and shift from where we are without pain, I don't think that's logical.
There's a saying in the business world and in lots of worlds: better, faster, cheaper, pick two. And you hear that in lots of different permutations. And it basically means you get to choose between certain things you can implement, but it's at the cost of something.
Of something else. Yeah.
And this is, and don't get me wrong, everything Trump is saying about the economy, growth, low inflation or deflation, even without crashing the economy. So growth, deflation, balancing the budget, those are all great ideas. And I have no issue with, again, that high level one sentence, this is what I want to do. My issue is that it's here are the three, pick two. You can't have all three. And which one is going to be the one that we don't pick? Are we going to see a massive recession? Maybe. Elon Musk said we would. Are we going to see massive inflation? I personally think if you do big tariffs and you deport 10 million low-wage workers, we're going to have massive inflation. Do you see whatever the other one was? I mean, tariffs in general. So are you not going to do tariffs? If you don't do tariffs, you probably save a lot of that pain. But that was your single biggest campaign promise. And I don't know why people even care, but if people care about you keeping your campaign promise, you got to implement tariffs. And so I feel like something's got to give. We can't do everything we're saying we're going to do. I'm curious which one's going to give, and is it going to cause a problem that outweighs, is the negative of that thing that we have to give in on going to outweigh the positive of the other stuff? And I'll use deportation as an example. We can talk about immigration all you want as a social issue, but as an economic issue, it's very, very clear that deporting a lot of low-wage workers is going to be really, really bad for our economy. And it could be really bad for society as well. And so we need to make that decision. And again, I'm not saying from a social standpoint, is it good or bad? I'm just pointing out if he carries out that promise, it's going to impact his ability to carry out his economic promises, because that's going to be really bad for inflation. That's going to be really bad for jobs. It's going to be really bad for the economy.
So I think with the deportation stuff in there, first of all, yes, we need people. But within the last 4 years, the astronomical rise, this flooding over the border is so wild that I think it needs to be balanced out. It's unlike anything our country's ever seen. And I think right now it's doing more harm than it is good. When you have immigration, when you have people coming in, right, that is good. It's totally good. We need it. Everything you said is right, Jay. But what we saw in the last 4 years, that was insane. And I think it tipped us over to a point where not only was it helping, it was incredibly hurting us in a really bad way. And so I think he needs to balance that out. Deporting every single, I don't even logistically know how you do it or whatnot, but to try to, first of all, the border has to get closed up. You have to get that under control. And to try to take care of these, millions and millions and millions of people every year that have been coming in for 3 years, there is something that people are going, what are you going to do about this? And I feel for those people like that. That's a real thing when you go, look at this problem that we have that we allowed to have. And I think it started to hurt more than it helped. And I think there needs to be a counterbalance act. If you go too far, you're exactly right. That'll send shockwaves through. And I do not agree with that. But at the same time, I don't think you can sit back and say, we're going to let 20 million people that came in the last 3 years, just, oh, okay, we don't care. It doesn't matter. You're here. We're done.
But as an American citizen who's being represented by Trump and now Republicans in Congress, and again, I'm okay with it if we do the right things and things go well. I don't have an ideological issue with the idea of Donald Trump in office. I have no issue with Donald Trump in office as long as he does good things for this country. Just like I'd have no problem with Harris, even though I didn't like her as a candidate, I'd have no problem if she did good things for the country. But my issue is I don't know what he's planning to do because all we hear is lots and lots of promises, lots and lots of hyperbole. And I mean, you admit yourself it's hyperbole. So what can we actually expect?
But Jay, can I just step in here? Can I just step in here? And I'm using as my base case, based off of his campaign promises before and what he did, that my base case is he's going to do a little bit of both. So something like tariffs, he's going to do a little bit and he's going to call it a win. And something like immigration, he's going to do a little bit and he's going to call it a win. So obviously he says like sweeping immigration, day one, we're going to do all this stuff. I don't think anyone believes he's going to be able to even pull that off logistically, but he will do something. And so if he does some measured deportation and harsher immigration status, and he does some more measured version of tariffs, like if that's your base case, because that's what I'm using as my base case, do you think, how do you think that will end up? Do you think that will be bad for us as investors and as a country, or do you think that is something that could potentially be?
I think there's going to be a balancing act, and I think it's going to take somebody smarter than Donald Trump. And again, no offense to him personally, it's going to take some really, really smart economists. And is he the type of person that will put his faith and trust in really, really smart economists to make these decisions for him, or will he just want to unilaterally make those decisions? We're going to find out, and I hope the answer is one that we like. Here's the other thing, and this is an issue where it's not about is he going to go a little bit or just implement a little bit of what he said, but one of the topics that I feel like didn't get talked about is healthcare. So I've heard everything from we're going to repeal Obamacare, which obviously, well, he tried. He missed it by one vote. Well, here's the thing. What if that one vote would have gone through? It's now been 7 years and we still don't have a healthcare plan from him. So if that one vote had gone through, we have absolutely no idea where we'd be today in terms of healthcare. And this is a topic that's important to me personally, but I know is important to tens of millions of Americans who have pre-existing conditions and may not be able to get affordable health care anywhere else. And so how do you reconcile his promise of we're going to repeal Obamacare, we're going to replace with something better, we're going to keep pre-existing conditions, and we're going to bring the cost down? I don't know how that's possible. I can
jump in on this. The insurance is like what it is. So Obamacare had nothing to do with at all, nothing to do with the price of healthcare. Nothing. It was called the Affordable Health Care Act. There was nothing in it that had anything to do with that. All it did was take people that didn't have health care for certain gaps and allowed them to access through a portal backed guaranteed by insurance companies, right? And they could go on there and they could adapt and they could choose a plan, which was then offset, right, to by the government. And so that's all it was. It was to open it up to that however many people, first year, 2 million people or whatnot, to get healthcare. It did nothing, not one thing, not only to touch healthcare costs, they guaranteed pharmaceutical companies. So pharmaceutical companies have had the largest raise in prescriptions and a compounding rate than we've ever seen in the history after Obamacare, because what they did is they extended by 50% their ability to keep and house patents on pharmaceuticals. So he gave the pharmaceutical companies and the medical companies, that's how he got buy-in to allow these other people to come in. Now, when the first go around, when he talked about Obamacare, the idea of repealing Obamacare was to not allow it, to say, we're going to add these people on, but then the medical system, we're going to give you everything you want and more. As in, they did nothing to touch the cost drivers, yet they increased the people that are utilizing access to it. Now, that made healthcare costs go up, unequivocally, across the board in a major way. It did, though, cover people that didn't have it. It's not that it was all bad, right? It's not. It covered people that didn't have it. So the question was, and the idea is, you can't say we're going to increase your total population by a huge amount of people that utilize a service, say that it's going to be affordable, but not touch the cost drivers. You can't give medical, pharmaceutical, runaway tickets to charge whatever they want and then add the population in and expect to go down.
Yeah, but I don't think Jay's saying like, oh, Obamacare was perfect and there doesn't need to be changed. I think what he's saying is that like we don't know what Trump's going to replace it with. And that's scary.
You said more in 2 minutes than Trump has said on healthcare in 8 years, and that's what concerns me.
I'll actually give you the thing is he said he walked through I had clients. We actually walked through this. I know I have a whole. Actually, I can actually give you our whole.
Maybe we could do another segment on this because by my math, we got 6 minutes left of Jay. So and we know that it seems like AJ and Jay have a lot to say on all of these topics. But I'm going to try and wrap this up in the next 6 minutes. I'm going to I want to get everyone's feeling after this. I want to kind of say, okay, like, are you optimistic? Are you scared? Are you sad? I kind of want to just get everyone's feeling one time before we wrap this up. And I'm going to start with Mauricio because I want to make sure Mauricio gets his 2 cents in here before Jay and AJ get in it.
Well, I appreciate that. No, I'm one of these entrepreneurs that refuse to allow politicians or anything like that affect, my day to day. So from my perspective, my personal perspective, whether it would have been Trump, Harris, all Congress split, to me, it wouldn't have made a difference. Yeah, it may have cost me more money here or less money there, but at the end of the day, I'm going to take care of myself and my family. I'm not going to rely on the government to do any of that stuff. Having said that, I am optimistic with some of these things that I think are going to pass for the real estate community. Again, putting it aside from Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, like there's a real estate podcast and we're all in the real estate world and I'm in the syndication world. And a lot of things that will benefit my clients and my community, which is the real estate community, I think are much higher probability now with a Trump administration and both House and Congress in the same party. I think a lot of these things will pass, which will be beneficial to a lot of real estate investors, which is really sort of that's where I'm kind of close to.
AJ, how you feeling?
I'm a mixed bag. First of all, whether he won or not, it's like I feel the same way as Mauricio. I wasn't a Trump supporter. I didn't Harris. I think there's good things, there's bad things. I am not happy about all of the branches going right. The red wave, I'm not happy about it at all. I wish we would have had a split, and I would prefer them to be very split. So I'm not happy about that. That makes me worried about the speed at which things come in, and we do not get to see the impact of policy changes because they're happening so fast until it's too late. So if I'm nervous about something, I'm nervous about that. But overall, I'm very excited because of the main issues that were addressed for me, which particularly my first and foremost was government spending. It was, and so I never seen anybody talk about cutting down government spending in a way that they did. And him surrounding himself with these people and walking through saying, this is how we're going to do it and eradicate it. That to me, that was good. I really, really like that because that is something that will affect for the futures. I think pro-business, all that kind of stuff, I'm very happy with that. And I am very positive for a future outlook to change, hopefully, things, right, that needed to be changed, that people were suffering with. I don't like, first of all, necessarily the way, though, that it's set up. as in the shift of powers. It was an overboard. I think it was an overboard. It's too much. But I am happy, and I hope that this actually is a wake-up call for the Democratic Party, because they lost the plot. And I said this when they originally picked Harris, when we were all talking, I'm like, the Democratic Party just failed us. They were supposed to give us, right? And I think the Republican and Democratic Party have failed us. I think in policy, I think spending, they have these promises, both sides, and I'm very frustrated with that. And I hope that this was a really clear message, and that the Democratic Party will regroup and they'll become better for it. And then the Republican Party would do it too, right? But the problem is they're getting the clear message. I hope that those things will help us in politics. And I hope that those things will help build a future. I am optimistic, but I'm not happy about all the branches and everything going one way.
Well said, Jay.
Sum it up in one. Well, I'll start with one word. I'm disappointed. So I'm not specifically disappointed that Trump won, because realistically, I would have been equally disappointed probably on the other side as well. I'm disappointed that we had two campaigns that were essentially devoid of policy substance, and they simply relied on fear tactics. It was communism on one side and it was fascism on the other side. Neither party should be proud of the campaign they ran on. I'm disappointed at the outcome. So I said this last week. I thought it was important that we had a split government, that whatever the out of power party was, controlled at least one congressional house. Well, given that each platform, each side couldn't garner the support of even half the country, means that one party is basically now going to be able to force a platform that more than 50% of the country is opposed to. And I didn't want that. I was hoping, if nothing else, we at least had some gridlock and some checks and balances. So I don't think that's good for building unity or consensus. And I'm disappointed that we didn't have any real policy direction from Trump or the Republicans. I mean, we had high-level talking points, but it's still not clear to me what we're going to do. And again, 100% it would have been the same exact thing if Harris had won. No clear policy direction.
I know we got to go. I know Jay's got to go. But my pushback, just based on what AJ, is it that there's no policies, or that the media didn't report on the policies? Because to AJ's point, like, Trump sat down for 3 hours. I didn't watch the 3 hours. And my guess is nobody sat down and listened to three, maybe AJ did.
So that was the day before the election. I didn't listen to that.
The policies may have been there. AJ's saying, and I trust AJ, AJ's saying that during these 3-hour conversations, 2-hour conversations, which no candidate has ever done before, it's all sound bites, it's 10-minute thing. This is a 3-hour, a real legitimate man-to-man conversation between one of the candidates and a podcaster, and he did it with 3 different podcasts that are literally over 2 or 3 hours. 5. Okay, 5. So he has like 15 hours of conversations. Now, I didn't listen to any of it. But to say that there were no policies when it sounds like there were, we didn't get to hear it because nobody was reporting on it. We don't have the time to listen to all those things anyway. That was my only point on that.
After we got the after Waltz came into the bridge, they only took 12 policy questions the entire time. Trump personally alone took over 80 in that exact same period of time.
To be fair, we can. I love blaming the media as much as anyone else, but if you look at what the Republican Party themselves were pushing in ads and pushing out to us, it wasn't policy based either. So it wasn't just the media; it was them. It was them deciding.
I stopped listening to Trump like a month ago when somebody asked him, "My childcare costs are going through the roof. How are you going to help me control my childcare costs?" And he rambled for 5 minutes about tariffs, as if there was some relationship. That's kind of when I tuned out and decided he hasn't thought about these things. And so,
because you tuned out doesn't mean they didn't talk about it. And to compare the two and say that that's wildly not true. The data is he did so many more interviews. And we're talking just Trump, not to mention he's surrounded.
Were these all in the last week or two? Because I've
been doing this for a month or more. He did so JD Vance alone, the amount that he went out. And then he went and got RFK. He's assembled a team. And then they did open nights. They did the Twitter thing where they talked about government spending, how they would cut that down. I've never from a presidency ever heard him and see the people that surround with go so in depth in an election ever. There's never been that much content, and never been where, I mean, JD Vance alone in his, podcasts and everything that he went on, it was wild how in depth he went. I've never seen that before.
Well, let me leave it at this.
It's tough with Trump though too, like to cut through that noise because he does tend to ramble and get off topic.
Let me leave it at this. If we can get the things he's promised, lower prices, cheaper gas, lower mortgage rates, a balanced budget, a strong economy, solve all the world wars and no geopolitical concerns, lower taxes, and we can do all of that without the threat of marginalizing any minority groups, because I know there are people out there that are scared of a Trump presidency because they feel like they've been marginalized. If we can get all that, I'll vote. Well, obviously I won't vote for him again. I'll vote for JD in 2028. Give me 2/3 of that. Give me half of that, and I'll vote.
DJ, that's not really fair though, too, because you'd have to hold Kamala and the other side to the same standard. And just because people voted for Trump doesn't mean that they believe he's going to take care of all those things. It just means that they think he's going to do a better job than Kamala. So I know you got to go, man. I'll leave it with my feelings. It's kind of a mixture of CJ, kind of a mixture of that. I would take it. I'm anxious. I woke up this morning with a real anxiety looming over me. Like I felt like I was walking around today and everyone was acting normal, and I felt like it was like something had changed, and like I just couldn't see it. I'm anxious just because I don't know what's going to happen. I like, it's literally the definition to me of the devil. Like Kamala was the devil I knew. Where like if she had been elected, I wouldn't have anxiety because I would know I wouldn't agree with it. I wouldn't have been like happy with what her policies, but I would have known kind of where we're going. And now I just have that anxiety of I don't know where we're going. I'm mad. This brings me back to my mad where like I know everyone considers himself independent, but this is my first election I was able to vote in as an American citizen, and I woke up mad that that we had to vote for Kamala. Nothing against her as a person. Like she might turn into an excellent politician eventually, but she was kind of just thrust on me as an option. And I didn't really get that option to be a Democrat, I guess is the thing. I know I probably come across as Republican on this podcast, but that's because I'm really talking about real estate, and real estate is really favored by Republican policies. But I also have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old daughter, and I had to choose on that. And I do think for the majority of the policies, like Trump is going to be better for the country. For the overall state of something for my 7 and my 9-year-old daughter of what the country is and how Trump tends to divide everybody, how he has been empowering mainly young white males to be misogynist and things like that. I know that has nothing to do with like, economy or stuff, but to me with a 7 and 9-year-old daughter, I don't like that is coming out. I don't necessarily think that he's telling them to be that, but it's empowering a group that I don't like. And I just don't like the way where that's trending. I feel like it set back the women's movement and for in a family with very impressionable age daughters. I would rather of the women's movement go forward, but that's a weighing. Unfortunately, someone like me, I have to weigh that. What's best for me as a business person, for me as a fiscal, or for the country fiscally, geopolitically, all of those decisions. Like I felt were leaning towards Trump, but then I also have to feel like what's the environment my daughters are growing up in. I had to unfortunately weigh that. The one other issue that I probably would have against Trump was I do believe in climate change is happening. The effects to me of what it's going to, how quickly it's happening and how that's going to affect us moving forward, I think are debatable, but I do think it's a real thing. And I don't like that idea that we're just head in the sand on that. I honestly don't believe that Trump believes it doesn't exist. I think it's a convenient thing for him. He's a very shrewd business person. And I think it's convenient for him to say it doesn't exist because that allows him to lean into the oil and gas, which helps our economy and is good for his numbers and the economy in general if oil and gas does well. So anyway, that's my feelings. It was kind of one of those, like, you ever hear that saying where if you're not sure how you want to decide something, flip a coin, and then whether or not you're upset or happy with the result of that coin flip. I feel like that happened to me this morning, where like I kind of had I thought I wanted something, and then like my feelings were mixed on it. Because I already said I voted split ticket. And I wish I hadn't had to. And so like I lost on one side and won on the other, I guess.
I think everybody feels that way. Like, yeah. I honestly, because when I look at it, and this comes back even down to what we were talking about before, I was really not happy with the Democratic Party. They forced this was the most disliked vice president in America's history. And they forced her right before onto us. And their message was, you vote for her now, get in line and do it. Like literally, they talk down on people. And then I
almost don't blame her, right? Like I almost felt like she had to do it. And I got the impression sometimes it was almost like she's being held hostage. Like she didn't really even want to be, she didn't feel like she was ready for this. Like this was like, obviously every politician at that level, senator, congressperson, has some sort of aspirations to move up and to possibly become president. But I don't think this was the timeline she had the idea of it.
You're exactly right. And she was forced into it. And I think too, when I look at it, along with those items, I think, I felt a lot the same way, but sometimes on the other side. So like, I think I was so tired of this idea that you vote for me or you're a racist. You vote for me or you don't like women. That it was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And honestly, I think done with it. It's like, it's so dumb. It's like, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, you're misogynist. And you're like, all you're doing is calling names and saying, if you don't vote for us, you're a horrible human. And I'm like, that doesn't win with me. Threats don't win with.
And that's been a trend where a lot of positions in the past would have been considered sort of a left-leaning or a liberal position. Now it's like everybody thinks everybody's been moving to the right, but it's like, like Bill Maher's a great example. Like Bill Maher, he's been like, everybody considers him now really a Republican, or even Joe Rogan, who like freaking voted for Bernie Sanders. Like suddenly Joe Rogan is a right-wing just because he agrees on a couple things or states a position, which in the old days would have been like, yeah, that's kind of a Democratic position. They're like, now it's all, hey, if you don't agree with, if you're not into like I think Joe Rogan was talking about the fitness thing. It's like, hey, if you're into fitness, well, now you're a right-wing racist conservative because you're discriminated against people who are overweight and obese and have other issues, and so it's gotten out of control. Like even the JFK stuff, like people look at JFK. I mean, he comes from like a Democratic, like the quintessential Democratic Party. Believes in a lot of the same democratic principles that his family did, like no wars and taking care of the health and poor. And now he's like, oh no, JFK's a right-wing wacko.
And I loved the fact that too, by the way, Trump surrounded himself with who? Democrats. And two, they don't even agree. In his speech last night, he even said, RFK, I'm going to give you this stuff, but you can't touch this other stuff because RFK is totally opposite with him on it. And they're working together. You not only saw none of that, you took one of the most liberal voting candidates, paired her with other extremely left, and then that's what you got. And so when I looked at the two, one was well-rounded. He was surrounded by business professionals, all of which were Democrat. This was the first time that how many people that he put around him had voted Republican. And I love that. I love this idea that you're surrounded by Democrats. They actually disagree with you and you disagree with them. And you can literally, in your speech accepting presidency, joke around about it because you're so wildly different. And I thought that we need more of that, but that name calling, you're a fascist. And then two, the moment they said, hey, we like this, you're dead, not only dead, but we're going to attack you. That is vile. And I hate that.
100%. And I think we've lost Kyle. Kyle, our trusted host, has had some technical issues the whole podcast.
So we can do the top 10. Are you ready for my top 10, Mauricio? Oh, Kyle's back.
I'm back. Sorry, my camera's been weird, and I'll just sum this up. I just hope that people don't automatically say like, oh, if you vote for Trump, you are this. Like, it was a tough decision, I guess, is the thing. So,
yeah. So can I do the top 10 since your camera's not working?
Yeah, I don't know how this is going to work since my camera's not working, but maybe they'll just throw like a 4 of us up or the 3 of us up. But I do have a top 10 because I thought it was interesting. It was interesting because I am from the state of Pennsylvania. And if you look at the top 10 states with the most political ad spending this cycle, who do you think came in number 1?
Based on what you just said, Pennsylvania.
Well, so we'll start with number 10. But these numbers are absolutely staggering to me, coming from Canada, where it's a 6-week election cycle, and we're talking about millions of dollars, like tens of millions of dollars spent in the entire cycle. All right, number 10, Texas, $357 million. Nevada, 364, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, Wisconsin, all kind of in the $500,000 range. Wisconsin, 653.
All right, Pennsylvania, probably Iowa. Let me see here. I'm going to do top.
Okay, here we go. I got it right here. I've got it on the notes. So top 10 was he was at Arizona number 6, Wisconsin was number 5 with 653 million. California, interesting. California number 4 at 712 million. Ohio 700.
Did you see how many people voted Republican in California? Holy cow!
A lot. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. Michigan was number 2 with 780 million, and Pennsylvania, the great state of Pennsylvania, where our good buddy Kyle Wilson and Badass Investor reside, $1.2 billion.
Wow. And what's the breakdown between the candidates? Because I saw Trump, he only raised it was a fraction of what she spent. I mean, it was like 25% or less of what she spent. That is wild to think that she outspent him like 4 to 5 times.
Kyle, I finished off your top 10 for you, buddy. Sorry.
I'm sorry about that. I for some reason it might jump out again. Hopefully the editor can help us out a little bit in the end. Obviously, one of the biggest post social media right now are all the people who are going to leave the country. They think that this is what happened last time. As a Canadian, they think all of a sudden they could just move to Canada because they want to and they would like to. Canada has their own immigration policies and processes as well, so that can't just happen. But it still does point to the idea that everyone wants to leave now, that we have a kind of this red state, which got me thinking, if you did have to leave, where would you go? So I'm going to give you 3 options, and I'll let you pick which place you would flee to. So obviously, number 1 is Canada. That's where everyone thinks they're going right now. Number 2, Spain, and then number 3. This is for you, Mauricio, Belize. So if you were going to become a resident of a new country, which of those 3 would it be? We'll do an F, Marry, Kill.
I would definitely go to Canada. I mean, I've lived in Belize, so I've been there, done that. And Spain would work for me just because I speak Spanish. So that's, my family doesn't, but I don't think that would be an issue. But Canada, I mean, honestly, you're in Canada. It's hard to tell the difference.
Basically, another state of the U.S.
It's another state. I mean, I've spent a little bit of time this year. I've been twice now to Canada. Beautiful. There's a lot of beautiful areas in Canada. So I think that's the closest. You're speaking English. It's very like if you just got knocked out and you woke up and you were in Canada. I don't know if you could figure out the fact that you were not in the U.S. So I'm going to say Canada number 1, probably Belize number 2, and Spain number 3.
I cannot leave the Rocky Mountains. It's not going to happen. I'm staying in Canada. I'm moving straight up north. I'm going right up there. I gotta be up in the northern Pacific with the Pacific Range and then the Rocky Mountains on the interior. I love it. I love the Canadian Rockies. I would only do that if I absolutely had to. Like, obviously, I'd have to be forced into it, but.
I mean, the major argument against Canada is obviously taxes. Taxes are even worse in Canada than they are in the U.S. None of you said Spain. Taxes are pretty high in Spain too. The big argument for Belize is obviously the beaches and the taxes are. I think a 25% tax rate is all there is. So.
First of all, Belize is a water sport destination. It's not a beach destination. You don't go to Belize for beaches. The beaches are actually pretty crappy, but it's a big water sport. So if you're into fishing and boating and jet skiing and all that kind of stuff, that Belize is definitely.
But you would be giving up quite a few of the modern amenities and luxuries that we've been used to. So anyway, Mauricio, anything to plug?
I was gonna plug Badass Investor for you, but you're back, so I will not plug Badass Investor. I will plug My book, Legal Strategy for Everyone. I wrote a book for Ken McElroy's publishing company, the old Rich Dad publishing company. It's called Legal Strategies for Everyone. You can find it on Amazon, and I need to feed my kids, so buy a copy.
AJ?
Awesome. Yeah, I'll plug the podcast. Go check it out. AJ Osborne. We had I had some more in-depth political ones that I was talking, not about Trump or Kamala, more about the Fed and how it interacts with the states and the economics between the two. So kind of a relevant topic given some of the discussions, specifically around what the Trump administration wants to do on that side. So yeah, check that out.
Still waiting for my invite to that new podcast, AJ. I'm going to plug my wife, Badass Investor. Go check her out at Badass Investor on Instagram and on YouTube. All right, let's wrap this up. Jay, sorry, you don't get a plug. I'll plug his newsletter, DRE Daily. Go check out dredaily.com.
I like it. He has to share his plug with all of us now.
Well, we get 4 plugs, and so I'm taking his.
And Kyle, not only is your drink gone, but your camera is gone.
Yeah, well, I decided to. It seems like if I just leave my camera off, it doesn't kick me out. So I'm just going to do that. And plus, I'm getting pretty sweaty. This midday, it's like super sunny. I'm in Philadelphia. It is 82 degrees here right now in the middle of November.
What?
How crazy is that?
Oh, it's snowing here,
and it's like the sun is like beating in on my little studio here. So like I'm sweating.
Yeah, we had a snowstorm yesterday.
Anyway, yeah, my energy drink has been gone. I'm going to hit the head. I know this is a pretty political episode. We'll probably be back to more normal scheduled stuff next week, but it was I didn't mind talking about it. So I will see you next Tuesday.
See ya.